if anybody needs to add anything to the conversation, and I'm not able to see that. All right. But so my name is Jennifer Salinas. I use she, her pronouns. I am a program manager with the Children and Nature Network. So part of my work is that I support communities, organizations like all of you, and just leaders across the country in creating more equitable access to the benefits of nature, especially for children, youth, and families who have been historically excluded from these opportunities. It's kind of the groups that we decide to focus on. And today I'm going to be sharing a bit more about an approach that we refer to as nature as healer. And this is a framework for integrating nature's healing power into services for children, youth, for families, and for the staff that are supporting those children, youth, and families. So in today's session, we're going to be exploring the benefits of nature and why we think it belongs in the work of caring for children, youth, and families, right? All the types of work that you all are involved in. We'll share a practical framework that we've been developing in our partnership with Casey that helps to show what nature's healer can look like within your agency or within your particular setting. We're also going to have a great opportunity to hear from a panel of some practitioners from the Casey family programs, and they'll really be able to help us understand what this looks like in daily practice. And there'll be some time for conversation and questions within that as well. And then finally, at the end, as Anna was just sharing, we do want to open it up and have some conversation for discussion, reflection, and let's talk about what this approach might look like in Minnesota, if there's ways that we can partner to support you in bringing this approach to Minnesota, and also just how you might envision it looking and integrating within your work. All right, so a lot to cover today. And hopefully you all are able to see my screen here. And before we did jump in to the presentation, I was hoping to have you all fill out a quick survey. This will just kind of give me an idea of where everyone is starting from. I probably won't be able to look at the results right now given my internet situation, but it'll kind of just still help me see where everyone is at the beginning of our survey or our session, sorry, and then at the end. So you can scan that QR code there, and that will take you to the survey. I believe it's about 5 questions. And I'm opening the chat too. So if you can scan the QR code and it'll take you, or you can follow this link. I'm not sure if that's going through. It says this message has been deleted. Oh, there we go. It's just taking a while. So I'm going to pause for a couple of minutes so you all can fill that out.
So I've taken a screenshot and it says that I'm waiting for the presentation to begin.
Of that QR code?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you use the, I saw someone just dropped in the chat that the link seems to be working. Can you try that? Apologies. I wonder if that's just something with my internet there. Is that working?
Yes.
Everyone? Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to skip this video because there's no way that's going to play. Okay, and as you all are filling out that survey too, or as you kind of finish up that survey, we can also start jumping into our icebreaker here. I would love for you all to think about a time. Now, Anna, that's okay. It was just a video to play some music in the background while everyone's filling out the survey, but it's not anything informative. But thanks for offering. So yeah, let's take a moment to just kind of ground ourselves in our connection to the true star of today's presentation, which is nature, and talking about its benefits. So I'd encourage everyone to think about a time that nature helped you feel better. And then think about what was that experience like? It could be something really big, what we usually refer to as big nature, right? Hiking in a national park or going to the ocean, or thinking about something small in your day-to-day experience that you have, like listening to the birds outside of your window, sitting outside in your backyard after a long day at work. So after you fill out that survey, just take a moment, hold on to that memory, and then would love to have a couple of you share either in the chat, or since there's just a few of us here, invite you to come off mute and share what comes up for you when you think about nature.
I can share. So in 2023, I decided to go camping for the first time. And I think I would describe myself as more of a glamper, but I really, I really wanted to have the experience of being outdoors by a lake in a tent. And so I'm in California. I drove to the Sam Houston National Forest in Texas and did 5 days in a tent. And I think it was transformative for me because it really was an opportunity to disconnect from the daily internet and the perseveration of, oh, I have to do this and lists and things that just kind of got in the way of my ability to be present. So when I was there in nature, what I did notice was that my eating habits changed. I wanted to eat closer to, the earth. My thoughts changed. It was more like, can I sit still in what's happening right here in front of me versus worrying about the past stuff or worrying about the future. And so it really was an eye opener for me, just how transformative it could be to just be present with nature.
Yeah, that's great, Pranika. Thank you for sharing that. My first time camping was in college and it was freezing cold. It was an interesting experience. But I'm also seeing some people drop in the chat. After a long day of screens, took my daughter to our local school forest, which is also amazing that you just have a local school forest. Can I say that? And looked for the first flowers blooming and soaked in the sun. It was so restorative. I felt all my tension melting away. I can feel that feeling of being able to see that. That sounds like such a lovely experience, Ariel. And let's see, Thomas shared, I live in the woods and have 2 pastures and connect with them daily. Wonderful. It's a core component of your daily wellness routines and also helps that you live 2 miles from Dunes State Forest. Yes, and wildlife refuge. That is amazing. And Anna sharing the first buds on the trees make me giddy and joyful for sure. Oh, thank you. Anybody else want to share? Come off mute and share. I am like a flower and I bloom with the sunshine. It helps my seasonal affective disorder for sure. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, for sure, right? Being in Minnesota and your long winters and then the sun comes out, I can only imagine what that's like. Okay. Well, hopefully that gets us a little bit grounded, right? Seems like you all have an idea. You've experienced your own personal connections to nature. You understand the benefits that it can bring to us for our own wellness. It reduces stress, it boosts moods. It can also create really meaningful moments with other people. And so it seems like you all have some knowledge of that, right? And what we really know from the research is that those healing qualities of nature that you all are naming and that I just shared, those aren't limited to those of us that might consider ourselves outdoorsy or call ourselves nature people. At Casey, we tend to call ourselves nature nerds. The research actually shows us that everyone and anyone can benefit from nature connection, regardless of your background, your experience, or even your access level. And actually, in fact, what we know is that nature can have an even greater impact on those with the most gain. It's a phenomenon known as the equigenic effect. And that term helps us or shows that nature provides greater benefits for children who are negatively impacted by economic disadvantage. So and actually does so more so for children that come from advantaged backgrounds, right? So there's actually a multiplier effect there that nature can bring. So while we know that nature is good for all children, it's especially powerful for those that might be at higher risk for poorer health or negative mental health outcomes, right? And those that we know might be at risk or are already experiencing adverse childhood experiences. So knowing all of this is what led us and our partners at Casey Family Programs to build what we now call our Nature as Healer strategy. And so you can see on the screen here some of what this work has turned out. We started off by asking the staff at Casey, what are your core goals that you're working towards with the youth and families in your care, or that you're working with? And we'll hear a little bit more about Casey Family Programs here in a moment, but if you're not familiar, the Casey Family Programs is an organization that supports children in the foster care system across the country, and Patsy will do a much better job of explaining their organization here in a bit. But so we asked their staff, right, when you're working with children and youth and families, what are the goals that you're working with? And their answers became the foundation of the benefits wheel. So those domains that you see on the outer ring here, the healing, self-regulation, safety, family connection, and permanency. Those are the key domains that they named, that those are the goals they're working on. So our research team at Children in Nature Network then asked the second question from there and wanted to know, is there existing research that shows that nature can support progress in these particular areas? Right? Do we have research that shows that nature experiences can meet the specific needs of children and families that are experiencing adverse childhood experiences or might be likely to experience adverse childhood experiences? And I'm sure you can guess what the answer was, right? Yes, of course, we found plenty of research to support that. And the benefits wheel in the center ring there, it shows us all the different ways and the research that we have that connects to those key domains. Hopefully this QR code works. And I'll send out information after our meeting too. So if you can't access this or you want to access it later, you can. But that QR code right there will take you to our toolkit that's on our Children in Nature website. There you'll be able to find more detailed information about the Nature as Healer approach. There's links to all of the research that backs this up and supports the benefits that I'm talking about here. And you also find some printable one-pagers of this benefits wheel and some other related resources that are available in both English and Spanish. They make really great resources for sharing with colleagues, with partners, or leadership if you're interested in introducing this work as a possibility in your own context. And I will actually drop that link too to the toolkit in the chat. So if anybody wants to go ahead and save that. Okay. So that's what the benefits look like from just kind of a from the research perspective, right? What we know it can look like and how it can support. But now, right, you all might be thinking, but what does that actually look like in practice? I know you all are out there working directly with youth and families, just like our Casey staff does. So I want to be able to offer some examples of that to you all. So I have a few slides here that are sharing some brief scenarios that are aimed to reflect real world situations where nature is being used within family and child serving context. And I'm actually going to ask volunteers if you can read these scenarios for us. And as the rest of you listen, I really invite you to consider, could something like this be possible in my setting, in whatever your practice and your context is? Or what might that look like in the work that you do or lead, right? Maybe it's similar, but might look a little bit different. So would anybody be willing to read our example up here?
I can. This is Erin.
Erin.
A caseworker takes a child who has experienced trauma on regular walks at a local park. At first, quiet and hesitant, the child finds comfort in the routine as the steady rhythm of walking and nature's predictable patterns help ease anxiety. Over time, shared observations, like a tree recovering from a storm or a flowing stream, become metaphors for the child's experiences. This organic connection to nature fosters trust, eventually allowing the child to open up about their trauma in a safe and reflective way.
Yeah, thank you, Erin, for reading that for us. And one thing that we will recognize is there's many ways in which those domains are going to overlap, right? There's the types of activities and the practices that we bring to our work with youth and families are going to bring healing and family connection, self-regulation. But this scenario was particularly designed to kind of highlight the healing nature of nature, I guess, the healing nature of nature. So I put there that nature provides space for emotional recovery from trauma and provides opportunities for stress reduction, enhanced mood, and mental health benefits. Right? So let's look at another example. And these examples were specifically designed with our KC staff in mind, so kind of coming from the framework of those working in the foster care system. Would someone be willing to read this one?
I can. This is Lisa.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
Foster parent struggles to bond with two young siblings as structured activities often feel forced. The caseworker suggests unstructured outdoor play. One afternoon at a nature trail, the children climb logs and create games with sticks, their laughter replacing silence. As they play freely, conversation flows naturally, and the foster parent joins in, following their lead. Over time, these moments become routine, strengthening their bond and creating a space for connection without pressure.
Yeah, as I'm sure you can guess, right? That one is mostly illustrating family connections. And we see that shared experiences in nature really help to strengthen relationships between youth and their caregivers. And some of the research that you'll see if you head over to that toolkit and our research library, which I saw Anna dropped in the chat there, we see that the amount of communication that happens between youth and caregivers, right, like the actual number of words that is shared, is increased when they're in an open-ended natural experience versus a closed-ended one indoors. So it can really lead to just better, smoother communication and relationships. And I have one more example here, if I can get one more volunteer to read.
I'll jump in. This is Anna. A child moves frequently between extended family members, leaving them feeling disconnected and without a sense of belonging. Their caseworker, often meeting them in different locations, introduces a simple ritual, collecting a small natural object like a feather, or a rock, feather, or leaf at each visit. Over time, these items become a personal timeline, offering the child with a sense of continuity despite constant change. When the child finally finds a stable home, their collection serves as a reminder that their journey has had continuity, reinforcing a lasting sense of identity and belonging.
Yeah. And we see this as helping to support permanency, right? This is one activity that we might want to bring with our interactions that helps to build a connection to nature and then supports an overall feeling of stability, consistency, and belonging, even when other aspects of life are changing and feel unstable. So those are just a couple of examples to kind of wrap our head around what this can look like in practice and get some ideas of that. But obviously you all share that you incorporate nature practices into your own self-care. Sounds like you're doing it with your children and taking them out to see the flowers in the school forest. So I would love to hear some of the ways that you all are maybe have some real life examples of either how this is showing up in your work already with youth and families, Or if it's maybe not showing up in that way yet, how else do you use it in your own self-care practices? Would love to have people come off mute. It's always nice to hear voices. But if that's not comfortable for you, the chat works too. Anybody have an example they'd like to share?
This is Lisa. I can share.
Go ahead.
Part of my self-care practice is homework from my therapist that I see every other week, and it's getting outside, being in the sun, walking, taking in the fresh air, and it's part of my daily self-care routine. And I think it's part of a really good wellness practice.
Yeah. And I love that that is homework from your therapist, right? So obviously your therapist is aware of the benefits of nature and getting you out there to support your self-care. That's cool.
I'll share again. So this is Pranika. So I have always struggled with regular exercise routines. There's just something about going to gyms or having to lift, weights and things that just, it's not appealing to me. So what I have been incorporating is gardening. At one point I had a whole pile of mulch delivered to my home, dumped in my driveway by like this huge truck. They lift it and it all pours out. And I just practiced getting the pitchfork and spreading it around the yard and taking some over to the community garden. And then I realized, oh, this is really my form of exercise. And so I garden quite frequently. I have an orchard at home and then 2 community gardens. So that is my form of exercise. And I like that it doesn't feel like a chore, but that it also feels like, in addition to getting that physical workout, there's the mental piece, there's the connecting with nature, but it also feels productive. So even though I'm sure lifting weights, all those things are productive, it seems like that's more limited to the physical aspect versus creating something and producing food and communing with my community. So that is definitely a self-care practice that I've incorporated over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Thank you, Pranika. I also love gardening. I can go out there and just spend hours outside doing that. And there is research that shows us, right, that exercise outside brings more of those mental health benefits to it, in addition to the physical benefits, as you were just sharing. Anyone else care to share? Is this showing up? And are there any nature practices showing up already in the work that you do? Or even with your staff, if you're not necessarily working directly with youth and families?
I can share something that maybe is on a different scale to maybe help some pieces flow. Is I'm really fortunate to have an office and to have my office in my house next to a window, because I have had years where that wasn't the case. So I spin my chair around and look outside when I'm on the phone. It just gives me a break from the screen, and it really just nourishes me in a way that nothing really else does. Is just a moment to view nature, and it's behind a screen in the air condition, which really kind of works for me. I'm in Texas, South Texas at that. And so maybe, that's something, that I practice self-care, isn't quite as grand, but perhaps that is jogging some things that you might be doing as well, that you might not have thought about initially.
Thank you, Mimi. All right. Well, we can go ahead and we'll keep going, but if any other ideas come up, I do invite you to share in the chat. Just for those of you that did hop on a little late, my internet decided to drop out before we hopped on, so I can't see any of your videos. So if there is anybody that wants to, I'm on a hotspot from my cell phone instead to be able to do this presentation. So the chat might just be an easier way to get my attention if you need anything. So anyway, we have a couple of more things that I want to show you just before we hop into our panel and we get to hear more about what the work with Casey family programs has really looked like and how this has been embedded into their organization and their practices. But I wanted to share with you our Nature is Healer framework. So we're still in the process of designing this, and we're doing so in partnership with the staff at the Casey Family Programs, with our leadership cohort there, which we'll also talk a little bit more about later. And the version that we are working on for them is really tailored to match the specific needs and the modalities, the approaches that the Casey Family Programs staff uses within their work with youth and families. But the framework itself has been intentionally created to be usable and adaptable by a wide range of agencies and organizations. So hopefully what we share here today will feel like it resonates with the type of work that you do as well. So what you're seeing here is a tiered structure that moves from kind of the big picture of the framework and the goals of Nature is Healer down to the indicators, which are the day-to-day ways that this can look. So at the top, we have those key domains. These represent the main areas of change and integration that we feel and have seen need to happen through our work with Casey, that need to happen for Nature is Healer to really take root within an organization. Those key domains are grounded in 3 focus areas that we've worked on with Casey. So in the area of supporting youth and families with nature-based approaches in direct services. The second one is building community partnerships with other organizations and other community partners in the area that can help expand access and opportunity for nature connections. And the third, as we've been talking about here a little bit, is strengthening staff well-being through nature-connected self-care. Those are kind of the 3 focus areas that we've been bringing to the work and that show up in the framework. Then under each of those domains, we have a set of core competencies. So this describes the knowledge and the skills and the practices that are recommended in that domain. And then beneath that, you'll find indicators. These are specific examples of how the competencies can show up in real world settings. These are meant to be more behaviors, programs, supports that can be put in place to help bring Nature as Healer to life in the work that you're doing and in your organization. The framework that we're creating aims to give practitioners and organizations like yours a shared language and a roadmap for how to integrate nature into the work that you're doing. Again, whether that's through direct services, if it's about staff wellness, if it's looking at community partnerships, or hopefully in time, all of the above, as we feel like it's really important to have all of those pieces working together. All right. So one other thing I want to share is I wanted to take a moment to clarify when we are designing the framework, what it's intended to be and what it isn't intended to be, I think is really important. The framework is meant to be a reflection and a planning tool for you and other organizations to use. It's here to help teams think through what is already happening well, where is there room to grow, how do we want to take meaningful and realistic next steps to keep adding more nature into our work. It's not designed to be a one-time assessment. It's not even intended to be an assessment in kind of that term that you kind of check off and that you move on from. It's really designed to be an ongoing conversation that you're looking at how you can grow and continue to build off of. It's also intended to be a flexible approach. While there are these different domains and indicators, it's not intended to be used as a rigid checklist. It's not a curriculum that fits in for, that you have to complete every single thing on there. We really are putting it out there so that every organization or program or community that decides to take on this work can approach this differently and tailor it to fit into their specific model, just like we're doing with Casey. It's also intended to be a collaborative effort and not something that just lives at the leadership level at an organization or an agency. We really want the work to be co-owned and shaped by the people closest to the work, right? Those frontline staff, those social workers, those school nurses, home visitors that are out there doing this work. And that's what we're doing with Casey as well. The leadership cohort is composed of staff at each of the field offices, and they're helping us to really shape the framework so that it fits within their context. And it's also meant to be a complement to your existing work, not one more thing to pile on. We know that your work, when you're working in the child and family services sector, you probably have a very full plate and lots going on. But the goal is to help you integrate nature-based strategies into the work that you're already doing and to really build on the strengths and the expertise that exists within your teams. And one last piece, it's really meant to be practical and scalable. Right, you can choose as an agency or an organization where you want to start. Does one domain speak to you more so than the other one? Which core competencies do you want to work on? And you can decide, do you want to start small with just a few practices? Do you want to build and really do this full organizational change? The framework is designed to help to meet you where you are and help decide where to go next. Right? So we're going to revisit the framework with a little bit more detail later on, and we'll look at a few examples of the core competencies and the indicators so you can maybe wrap your head around a little bit more of those specifics. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can hear from our panel now. Okay, so give me a second, need to readjust my screen here. All right, so I have three members from the KC family programs here. Like I said, we have been partnering with them and they have been directly involved in implementing Nature's Healer in their different roles, which I'll share with us here in a moment. And so they bring a unique perspective from either working at the leadership level or that direct work. And they'll help us see what this has looked like in real everyday practice. I'm going to be guiding the conversation, with a few questions. And then afterwards, after we spend a little bit of time in conversation, then we'll open it up for a few questions. So if you all have anything that you would like to know from our practitioners here. So I'd love for us to start off with introductions. And Patsy, I'm going to invite you to start us off. And if you can share your name, your role in the organization, and maybe just, if you haven't already, because I know Pranika and Mimi kind of had a chance to share, but what's one way that you personally connect with nature for your own self-care?
Hello, everyone. Patsy Sellers is my name. My title is Managing Director of Field Offices in Child and Family Services, which is one of the arms and actually the roots of our foundation, which, Jen, did you say earlier you wanted me to share a little bit about who Casey is for folks who don't know?
Very little. I'd love for you to say a little bit more. Yeah.
All right. So we've been in the field of child welfare since 1966, and I joined the organization in 1995. And one of the ways that I really enjoy connecting to nature is, like other people have said, gardening. I have a huge garden, and I actually really call it that I grow soil versus anything else, really a super worm-filled, biodynamic, bird-feeding kind of soil.
Great. Thank you, Patsy. Pranika, how about we have you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Hi, and good afternoon. My name is Pranika Burnham, and I serve in the role of an education liaison here at Casey, which actually gives me the opportunity to work with our families directly, but also with systems, particularly school systems. And so one of the things that first of all, I'm very grateful to be invited to this conversation. One of the things that is the cornerstone of my work is that children are experiencing a great amount of educational challenges when they are involved in the foster care system. And the gamut is huge, but I'll try to keep it succinct. A lot of our children are in special education classes, and so it requires a lot of advocacy on that end. But a lot of our children also have behavioral issues. They move from school to school, home to home, peer group to peer group. And so it makes sense that we're looking for modalities that are going to help with healing and self-regulation, which if you refer to the benefits wheel, those are two of the cornerstones. So I'm happy to contribute to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benika. We're glad to have you here sharing with us. And Mimi, can you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Yes, my name is Melissa Francis. I go by Mimi and use she, her pronouns. I'm a social worker in the San Antonio field office, working directly with youth and families. Obviously, the biggest part of my work I really see is helping them with a sense of belonging, being connected to people who love and care about them, and oftentimes learning how to connect with themselves. And that's how I see nature really playing such a big role in those experiences.
Thank you. All right, we'll start our first question here for Patsy. You were one of the people that really played the key role in initiating this partnership between the Children Nature and Nature Network and Casey Family Programs. What was it about that Nature is Healer? Well, I guess it wasn't called Nature is Healer yet, right? But bringing nature to your work that really resonated with you or felt important for matching up with the organization?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So as I mentioned, I started with Casey as a social worker in 1995. Prior to that, I worked in adolescent psychiatric hospitals. I mean, I've been in the field for a while now. And when I worked in adolescent psychiatric hospitals, we would take kids to ropes courses. And, that was like the first foray of my personal exposure in bringing young people who came from hard spaces into the natural world. And I saw lots of change in those kids when we would go out, like sense of confidence, sense of like, I can handle anything because I just jumped from the pamper pole kind of stuff. And then when I went to Casey in 95, we had a program at that time called the Wilderness Work Project. We had offices in 23 communities west of the Mississippi. And we had a program in Boise, Idaho, where we would bring young people who were in foster care together from all those different offices for a couple of weeks to get employment experience out in the woods. We had a partnership with the National Forest Service, and they would go and do trail maintenance. And I was actually a social worker on one of those trips. And I was in the Oklahoma office for Casey at that time, and we wanted to ensure that the young people that we served were really prepared for those experiences. And so we had our own backpacking program. We had a gear closet, and probably 3 times a year we take a group of kids backpacking in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. And I have so many stories of the transformations that I witnessed. And there are some young people that I still have connection with. One young woman in particular who's in her 40s now, and she identifies those times as the most transformational for her. And because of things changing with our organization, we stopped doing those programs. And many of the people who work for Casey now don't even have an experience with those. It was probably in 2018, I was sitting with the leadership of Child and Family Services, and we were thinking of new and creative things that we could bring into our work to supplement our trauma and healing informed care. And at that time, I was reading Florence Williams' book, The Nature Fix. And in that book, she identifies evidence after evidence after evidence of the benefits to us cognitively, creatively, health-wise, mental health-wise, of all the different things that nature can bring to us. And so I was like, shoot, we should be bringing this into our work with kids and families. And then shortly thereafter, there was a cover on Outside Magazine where actually the full cover said, Science's newest drug is free. And it was an article about the benefits of nature. And that free line really resonated, because what we do with kids and families, many times, it's kind of like an approach of get them therapy, get them parenting classes, get them all these things with all these professionals in their lives. And we knew that connecting people with nature and really having them experience their own benefits would be a way to help them access things that can be beneficial to them without having to pay someone or go through a provider for that. And so connecting youth and families seemed like a really, smart thing, but like pretty like, wow, that just makes a lot of sense, but nobody seems to be doing it. And so I started doing research and found the Children in Nature Network. And I had also previously read a couple of Richard Lou's books, the first being Last Child in the Woods. And I reached out and was able to have a meeting with Sarah Milligan Toffler, the president CEO of the Children in Nature Network, and with Kathy Jordan, head of research for the network. And I flew to Minneapolis, and we sat down and had a meeting and talked about where alignment was between what the Children in Nature Network was doing and where our foundation really saw the connection and what we were trying to do. And we found a lot of common ground. And so that really was the beginning of our partnership, and a real desire to bring their expertise in partnership with the expertise that we have in serving kids and families. And that's how it kind of began, and why we really felt that it was important to bring nature into the work, especially since families that encounter child welfare are some of the most stressed out families that we, that are in our communities. And if we can bring something to them that can really be very helpful and beneficial, then we wanted to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Patsy. That book, The Nature Fix, was one that really helped me jump all into this field as well after I read that. Yeah. And you shared, right, that you've had these great connections with youth that you worked, that you were able to get in these backpacking experience and get them out in nature, which I think leads wonderfully to our next question. And for whoever wants to jump in first, can you share a specific success story where nature had a noticeable impact on a child or a family or a staff member that you were working with?
There we go. I can. I think you even have a slide that I sent you, kind of illustrating this. I have a young person that I work with that really highlights how nature connects to permanency. I really feel like she was isolated from her family, had returned to care, really hadn't made any friends in the placement that she had, and struggled with not just that sense of belonging, but also her identity. She was disconnected from her ethnic identity, cultural background. She didn't know, so she didn't even have that higher level belonging, right? So very felt like she was kind of floating out in the world by herself. What I noticed though is that she had this connection to art, and everything that she really drew and painted related to nature. And so as I verbally noticed that, right, and I asked her about her work, she really started making those connections for herself about how she was feeling, and how her emotions were really conveying through her painting in a way that just wasn't happening in her talk therapy or even in her discourse with me, and still until I started making those connections to her nature work. And one of my favorite paintings that she did is a picture of a forest, but it's dark. It's almost completely, you can't really even see it. You can barely see the forest. Even with my flash on, barely see anything of the picture. It's only when she moved it into the sunlight that she showed me, look, a lot of things feel dark in my life, but I know that there is light. And you see this beautiful aurora borealis, multiple colors in the sky. You see little dots of white showing up as the stars in the sky. Um, and that was a way that she visually represented, what she's feeling and what she's going through, and in a way that really worked for her emotional regulation, to be able to express some really um, traumatic events that happened in her past in a way that she wasn't able to until I started noticing and being curious about that connection that she had to nature and how she was using it to express herself.
Thank you. And it is a wonderful painting. And unfortunately, because of my internet connection, I'm not even going to try to pull that up right now, but I will send it out so everyone can take a look at that, because it is really wonderful to see that difference. Thank you.
And I also have a story to share. So I'm working with a 17-year-old male who is a Ukrainian refugee with undocumented residential status. He currently resides in a group home. His birth mother, is the only family member he has in the US, and they're estranged. English is not his first language, and so he often reports feeling isolated and alone and out of place. He has very few opportunities to leave the group home setting because outside of school, he just doesn't feel like there's anything that he identifies with. And so he has struggled with a history of depression and obviously has a lot of mistrust of the system and of authority. And so he's not someone who is readily forthcoming or wants to open up during the visits. And so he had an opportunity to do one of his visits at the beach. And at that time, he reported it was the first time he'd ever even been to a beach. So this young man was fully clothed, jacket, shoes. It was bordering towards the evening time. And the social worker said, let's just get in the water. And he protested, oh my gosh, that's not practical. Like, I don't have the right equipment. And it was like, stop. We're just going to be in the moment. Clothes can be dried, shoes can be replaced, but here's an opportunity for you to just be present with nature and to be able to get all of the things that are weighing you down kind of off of your shoulders. This young man reported that water made him feel so free. He was giggling and splashing and jumping, and it was really, I think it was an opportunity for him to just kind of release all of that anxiety. But the other piece was then there was an opportunity to have a shared moment, right? And so now he asks to have his visits at the beach, where before he didn't want to come out of his room at the group home. And so I think just allowing him to have something that can take that weight off of him in the moment, but also provide an avenue to have a connection with that worker was an amazing use of nature as a healer. And so, that's just one example of how we've been able to do it. And I like what you said earlier, Jen, about we don't want to begin to do programming and introduce this as another add-on. The beauty about this type of situations that is able to be integrated into the already existing clinical practices, right? So it's just a matter of if we're visiting with this family, can we do that in a park? Can we do that at the beach? Can we do that just sitting in the grass? And so it's more palatable to our clinicians as opposed to creating this grand thing that costs money and resources and time, and it's another thing that you have to learn. And so I think that nature is probably one of the biggest gifts we can all ask for as clinicians.
Yeah. And I love the way both of the stories that you all have shared have really highlighted the way that nature can be used as a metaphor and really help to process things, right? You mentioned like get in the water and let that just like release everything. And through the painting that Mimi was sharing, right? That way that it was able to connect the darkness to the light. Just this way that us humans connect with nature, and it allows us to express ourselves in ways that might be a little bit difficult otherwise. Yeah. Thank you. Patsy, I'm not sure, did you have a story you wanted to share?
Um, I mean, I have so many stories, and not just my own, but from other staff that have shared their stories with me. I mean, I think what I want to connect to though is how quickly this was taken up. I mean, typically, you know, when we get ready to do a rollout of a new practice or something like that, we do a lot of work at headquarters and we like do a lot of planning. And so when I brought this up at our leadership team meeting, and our executive vice president was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. I sent an email out to our staff who were certified in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which is part of our trauma and healing informed care. And that's just a subset of our staff. But I sent an email out and I said, hey, here's something that we're thinking about. Is anybody interested in joining and really exploring this? And I can't tell you, like, I got responses within 30 seconds of that email is what it seems like. I know it wasn't quite that, but there were a lot of people who were like, already sign me up because I understand the benefits in my own life, or I'm already incorporating, you know, walk and talks into my work. And it just to me felt like it really emerged from an idea, but then how it all happened was really more from the ground up, because people who were having their own experiences with nature, the people who are serving the kids and families, saw their own benefits and then really wanted to extend that programmatically to youth and families. And I just want to underscore too that it's not about like these big backpacking trips. Those were some of my early exposures and experiences, but it's like Pranika said, just going and sitting in the grass. It's like, what's outside your apartment complex? Or like, look at that tree, like Mimi noticed, or, you know, shared when she's looking out her window. There's research that backs up all of that stuff. So nearby nature is what we really focus on, not like the big trip kinds of things. Although we do have stories of social workers who are teaching families how to navigate park reservation systems and helping them identify gear lockers in their own communities so that they can do those larger things with their families.
May I expand on something that Patsy just mentioned, Jen?
Yeah, go for it.
Trying to be really quick. So I was one of the ones that she was speaking of. I am part of that NMT cohort and just thought it was brilliant to add on the nature. But what I'd like to call attention to is during one of our first convenings as Nature as Healer cohort, one of the things that Patsy highlighted was the inequitable access to nature that folks may have. And I think anecdotally, I already knew that, but to have it called out and to be intentional about naming it and then brainstorming around how do we mitigate that, it actually was very powerful. So we talked about the fact that, you know, if our folks are growing up in concrete jungles, there might not even be that sliver of grass or that you know, that access to a beach. And there are other things, you know, it could be political reasons, it could be historical reasons, right? But I thought that it was important to call attention to that, because when I think of nature, I think sometimes it's the ski trips and, you know, I mentioned the camping, but for families that we serve where that might be prohibitive, it's really important for us to be intentional about what's free, what's accessible, and, you know, based on your ability, you know, wheelchair bound or whatever the case may be. I think it's important to invite that piece to the conversation. And so I really did appreciate that we were being intentional about calling those things out in our first convening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pranika, for lifting that up. That's a big part of the work, right? Is that we recognize who has access to the benefits of nature and who doesn't have as easy access, and how do we ensure that everybody is able to get access to these benefits. So I am looking at the time here, and I wish we could spend an hour just talking to our staff here, but maybe we'll just wrap up with one more question for each of you to answer. What advice would you give to others considering this approach and bringing this approach to their own work and their own context? And that's open for all three of you.
I can kick us off. Patsy knows this. I say it all the time, which is why I think she invited me to be part of this panel, is I am not nature girl. I am not the big hike girl. Please don't ask me to go camping or even glamping. It's just not. But I really feel like starting and that, that's the conversation that, when Patsy, came to introduce this to our office, and we jumped on board with it, was you don't have to be that, Mimi. You start where you're comfortable. And like, I love the ocean. I love a breeze. I walk outside right now in the springtime in San Antonio. We're the foothills of the hill country. Everything wants to kill me. All the pollen wants to kill me. But it's worth taking my Zyrtec and going outside to feel that breeze, feel the grass. I use a lot of metaphors in my work. I tend to use a narrative practice approach in the work that I do with my youth and families, because I just love that framework of that they aren't the problem, right? The problem is the problem. And in that language building around metaphors, using those nature metaphors where they can pick something up and really tangibly hold on to it, and also let it go, right? Though I've just seen some really big moments happen because I started where I was comfortable. I started noticing. I started in my air condition, behind my glass, um, and inviting youth who also have those same experiences with nature, um, to do that. And then we're stepping outside of maybe where we're comfortable all the time, um, to really do that together and growing together in that way. So I would just really, my advice is start where you are, start where you're comfortable, start with your youth, where your youth and family are comfortable. Um, maybe find where the nearest pool, community pool is, that's that you can access when it gets so hot. But even if it's a screen picture on a screensaver that you are inviting youth to reference, or even in their mind's eye, I think it's really important. And again, just again, I've said it a million times. Just start where you're comfortable, and you'll be amazed.
And I would add two things to that in terms of advice. The first being find opportunities in the smallest of things. Again, I would not want to see resources be the reason why folks feel they can't integrate nature. And then the second is empower everyone to feel like they're an expert. When we were preparing for this conversation, we talked about there might be some reticence because folks feel like you have to have some kind of training about nature, or you have to have this specific body of information. I have to know the names of flowers, or I have to know what's poisonous. And I would push back that nature is something that belongs to all of us and we're all a part of. We're all experts in nature. Even if it was as small as eco mapping, what do you see the minute you walk out your front door? If you look up, you see the sun. What do you feel? You feel the air around you. You see leaves blowing across your lawn. And so I just would invite that if we expand our thinking about what nature is and not be so rigid about it has to look this way, I think we'd be surprised that we truly are all experts about nature and how we can integrate it into our healing modalities.
Yeah.
So I see a few questions in the chat too. So like, what did the rollout look like? I think what I would share is take advantage of what Casey and the Children in Nature Network have been working on for the past several years, because I think it's nobody's done it before. I mean, we've done presentations at different conferences and things, like Monica and I and another colleague presented at the Child Welfare League of America, and people were like, "Oh my God, I never heard of this before. Yet it makes so much sense," kind of stuff. Our rollout was really in partnership and with Children in Nature Network, and we started with cohorts of our field offices, and we shared information about like the benefits of nature. We gave people experiences in nature. Monica and Francis at that time did site visits with our offices and connected them to community partners who were in the field of children and families in the natural world. And so we made a lot of community contacts that way. But most recently, we've really begun to focus on the sustainability piece about like, if you're a new social worker and you come on board, like what's our plan for bringing you into understanding the connection of nature in our practice, but it's also integrated in with our whole thinking and our umbrella of trauma and healing informed care. So we consider nature as healer as part of our trauma and healing informed care umbrella. And so the development of the core competencies and the things that Jen's going to talk a little bit more about is this year's effort to really ensure that ongoingly it's embedded from onboarding to again, the continued integration into our trauma and healing informed practice. So yes, training and research. I mean, I was a super nerd on research. I would bring all kinds of research to the things that probably drove Monica crazy in those first few years, because like, oh my gosh, did you know? And this is true because there's been more and more research about it. Like tree canopy and gun violence are related, like those kinds of things. It's you start peeling the onion of research and it's incredible.
Yeah. And I see that Anna was asking about the scope of the groups, the audiences for the framework. But the framework was originally designed in partnership with Patsy and the Casey Family Program staff. But the design of it, I think, is really flexible to meet different audiences. I can see it fitting into schools, family home visiting, right? It's really built around the different components of how this can look in your organization. And I will dive into a little bit more of a breakdown of it, and then that might help you see how it could relate to the work that any of you are doing. All right, and I think for the sake of time, let's go ahead and jump into that Nature's Healer framework. But thank you so much, Patsy, Mimi, and Pranika for sharing your experiences and how this has looked at Casey. And please, again, invite you all as we're moving along through the rest of the presentation, if there's anything else that you have to add about our work together, would love to hear you. Okay. So, yeah, let's go a little bit deeper into the framework here. Give me a second again, changing my view here. So one of the things that, so we have been trying to do this work with Casey for a few years, and it's developed in different ways. We've brought in different trainings and partnerships with local organizations. We come to their staff meetings and show some of the research. But one of the things that we consistently heard from the practitioners, the social workers out there was, okay, but how are we defining success? So what does this actually look like in practice? What is it that you want us to achieve when we're talking about nature as healer? So in response to that is how we started to really develop this framework to hopefully be a response to that. So at the top of the framework, we mentioned there's these key domains. These are the key areas where we think an organization should consider integrating nature and nature practices so that it can really take root across your organization. There are 5 different domains, which I'll go through. The first is understanding the foundational principles of nature as healer. So this goes into that research, the benefits, how does nature connect with the other modalities that you might be using at your organization, right? This is just kind of that basic groundwork. Do all the staff feel like they understand, why are we even doing this? Why is nature so important? How does it benefit our work? That's one of the domains that we start with in the framework. Then, of course, what does this look like in actual practice with youth and families? How are we integrating it into our culturally responsive practices or these outdoor visits that we're already going on, and making sure we're incorporating youth voice and goal setting, employment goals that we might be working on, right? What does nature look like integrated into those practices? office culture and staff self-care. This has to do with how is the office creating the space, fostering the space so that staff are really integrating nature into their day-to-day work, either in their own self-care or again with those practices with youth and families. Is there access to resources, to whether that's one-pagers, activity ideas, or actual nature kits that they can use? Is there space during meetings to talk about nature activities, things like that, right? Is the office really supporting and fostering this space for nature to be integrated? The fourth domain is partnerships and communities of hope. Communities of hope, that language specifically comes from the work with Casey, but it's about building those community connections. How can your agency consider partnerships with local parks, other nonprofits, cultural organizations in your community to help expand that nature access, to get your families and the youth that you're working with connected with other nature opportunities? Really expand what you are able to offer because you have partnerships and more connections to build. And then the last domain that we have as part of this framework is the organizational commitment and leadership support. So this is looking at, from that organizational level, what is put in place to sustain this approach over time so that staff feel like they have what they need in order to make this work happen on a day-to-day basis. So this is looking at things like the policies for the organization, the infrastructure, behaviors from leadership, how is this integrated into frameworks and training, right? At the organization level, how are we supporting this? So those are the main domains. And I'm not going to go through, there's a lot of detail within the framework around the core competencies and the key indicators, but I wanted to just show a few of them so that you can get a little bit more of an example of and see how this is structured. So here's one example that we have under the domain of working with youth and families. So again, this is looking at that direct practice work. One of the core competencies that falls under there is applies cultural responsiveness to nature-based interventions. And so we have several indicators that fall into that. This is probably not all of them in there, but right, these are steps that you all can take. And remember, this isn't meant to be a checklist, isn't it meant to say you need to do all of these things, but for your agency and your staff to choose, where do we want to build? Where do we want to focus? What feels like it's the right fit for our team right now? So thinking about how can you design nature experiences that are really aligned with families' cultural identities and their traditions, actually engaging families in the communities to learn what does nature actually look like in your cultural practices, right? So we aren't coming to them and telling them what their experiences with nature need to look like, but we're asking them, what does nature mean to you? Is it gardening? Is it indoor plants? Right? Is it growing food? What does it look like? And you're getting them involved in that. Here's, I have three that I'll show you. This next one is around the office culture and staff self-care. So one of the core competencies we have here is that nature's healer is integrated into workplace routines and just the overall team culture. So some of the indicators we have there. Staff have the option to do their check-ins outdoors, right, or have a walking check-in. There's time in staff meetings to check in about either staff self-care practices in nature or highlighting some of the things they've done with youth and families to get them outdoors, right? So that staff are learning from each other, they're getting ideas, they're hearing about these nature-based practices regularly and then encouraged to integrate it within their own work. And then this last one here, partnerships and communities of hope, with the core competency being building and sustaining community partnerships. And our indicators here, forming partnerships with local nature organizations to support youth and caregivers connecting with their networks of people. That's in quote because networks of people is a particularly pulled from the Casey language, but something that I believe can apply to any of us in all of our agencies. Advocating for equitable access to nature and local communities. These are just a couple of examples of what that might look like. Okay, so I see we're also running short on time here, so I'm going to skip this. This is talking about our partnership. I think that Patsy already got to share a little bit of what the partnership looks like, or what we've been able to provide over the few years that we've been working together. We did in-person visits to help facilitate workshops that were around staff wellness, as well as teaching some activities and talking about the benefits of nature. And I'll jump to the bottom. One of the things that we're most recently embarking on, which Patsy also introduced, was that we're working on 2 cohort-based learning communities. The first of these is the leadership cohort. So this is leaders from the different field offices. And that group is really designed to make sure that there's clear leadership, guidance, there's accountability at each of the field offices across Casey's work across the country to hold the work and continue leading it. And then we have our nature ambassadors group that hasn't started yet, but will be starting soon. And that is a group of what we're calling our nature champions. There will be 1 or 2 chosen from each field office, and they will be participating in train the trainer type workshops that I will either be leading or facilitating or bringing in some other organizers and support, with the goal that those ambassadors will then help be on the ground in each of the field offices to keep supporting that local capacity, move the work forward in each of those field offices, to kind of help be the point person and the champion that works alongside the leader at each field office and keeps that momentum going around this. And I did want to share a few of the things that we've learned along the way, because this has kind of been our first jump into bringing Nature is Healer to a particular organization or an agency at Children in Nature Network. The first one, as Patsy shared and Pranika shared, actually I think all 3 of them shared, nature doesn't have to be big, right? Nature can look different for everyone and does look different for everyone. That's really important for practitioners to understand in their own work and in work with youth and families, that we're not trying to force anything on anyone, but trying to help them realize the benefits that come from nature experiences. We also have learned that practitioners really need clarity. What does this look like in day-to-day practice? How do I integrate this into my own self-care, into my work with youth and families, right? Wanting some practical tools and strategies, and what the framework was really designed to do. And some of our additional training and support is really intended to provide activities, ideas, how to move this work forward. And the third lesson here is that implementation really takes time. It's not a plug and play model, right? Like I said, there's not a curriculum. This isn't a specific, there's not a specific way to do this. It's really about a shift in culture and practice within your agency. And that can take a bit of time. And it's not about doing it all at once. We really encourage you and your team to think about taking some time to reflect, decide what do we want to try out, how do we adapt this to make it really fit into our context, into the work that we're doing. All right, and one more thing before I open it up for some conversation. We really hope that today's session has helped to encourage you to think about how you might want to bring nature experiences into your own practices. And again, thinking about those 3 focus areas, right? What might this look like with your work out there in the community with youth and families? What about in your own self-care? A strategy that you bring to support the well-being of the other members on your team, of your staff, or in building partnerships out in the community. And at the end of the presentation, I'll share a link again to that toolkit that we were sharing earlier That will help you find some additional resources, that research. You can see some case studies and hear a little bit more about what this has looked like on the ground, to hopefully help you explore what this work could look like in your own organization going forward. But I also do want to add that if you're interested in taking a deeper dive, we at Children in Nature Network would love to explore a partnership with you. We can work with organizations and agencies to help co-design partnership plans that are tailored to your specific goals, to your setting, and to your level of readiness, right? How much of this do you want to take off or take on, sorry. And so I listed a couple of ways that these partnerships could look like. We could support a community of practice. That could be a cohort of participants from across agencies and sectors, just like what we have in this room right now. Give me a second, get some water. But we could bring this cohort together and we could explore the benefits of nature. We could look at some activity ideas, self-care strategies. We can do train the trainer workshops. We can help organize staff retreats that build around self-care and nature, and help build on some of those ideas, talk about the benefits of nature. We can also support in nature kits and activities that this can look like, help with planning workshops, or also do really custom partnerships like what we've built with Casey Family Programs. So that can include tailored adaptation of the Nature as Healer framework, leadership coaching, cohort development, implementation planning, developing action plans and action steps for how to integrate this. Right, just lots of opportunities, and really we would want to be in conversation with you to see what would be most helpful for your agency if this is something that you want support with. But really we hope that this becomes a part of your practice, whether or not you choose to move forward in a partnership with us. But these are just some ways of that could look. All right, so because we have a few moments, this says breakout room, but let's just stay in here all together and chat. Just take a few minutes to answer some of these discussion questions. I'm going to put them in the chat in case that's easier. Oh, that I'm not going to do that. That is gigantic. But did anybody have any new ideas coming up for you about how you might be able to integrate nature into your practices, into your programs? Are there any nature-based experiences that you're thinking might resonate particularly well with the communities you serve? What ideas are coming up for you after this presentation and after what you've heard?
I'm loving the idea of having a cross-agency cohort. I am, I think, maybe 2 classes away from getting certified as a horticultural therapist. And one of the things that I'm trying to wrap my head around is piloting some programming here at Casey. I'd love to have some thought partners around that initiative, to hear how others are implementing it across different systems, right? So it could be probation, it could be schools, it could be child welfare, it could be, housing. It really doesn't matter to me. So mental health is a huge one. So I'm really interested in tapping other agencies and other partners. I love that idea.
Thanks, Pranika. I did manage to drop those questions in the chat, and that way we can see each other a little bit better. Anybody else? What are you thinking about? Does this feel like it's something that you want to bring to your agency, to your work? Any thoughts bubbling up about what it could look like?
Hi, this is Lisa at the Department of Education. Lots of thoughts. One, I would love for you to come and present this information at our school behavioral health conference in November. I think more people need to hear about this, and it's mental health practitioners, professionals and school staff that attend that conference. Or have like an exhibit table, that would be amazing. The other piece is the staff retreats. I know like in the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Center where I'm housed, we do retreats. We just had one last week, and this would be an amazing opportunity to bring you in. Um, I'm also thinking, sorry, my brain's on fire. I'm also thinking about, we have a community of practice, a collaborative improvement and innovation network with like 17 school districts. And I would love to offer this as one of the sessions that we train on, every learning sessions that we train on every month. And I'm trying to think of what this would look like in practice, like as a tiered intervention or like a tier one. I'm looking at Pranika going, where do you see it fall within a school? That's all I have.
Well, we'll just say that I love that you are having all these ideas bubbling up. That is exciting to me and energizing that that you have all these things firing off. And in a moment, I'll pull up a post survey where you can share your contact information if you do want to follow up with us, and we can talk through some of those ideas. Anna, I see your hand.
Can I quickly chime in just to Lisa's comment? Like Children in Nature Network, one of the strategies, hi everybody, Monica Lopez McGee with Children in Nature Network. One of the strategies that we have seen to be most effective in communities is collaborating with school districts, particularly their facilities department on infrastructure. But what we've seen is that the facilities department we can think through like how we reimagine the open space on campuses, and that's not enough, that like we need that professional development. We need the school nurses on board. We need the school counselors, professional development for teachers. And so we are looking at how within that initiative, like how can we bring on, curriculum specialists, their other entities within the school department, within the school districts. And so Lisa, I love where you're going. And I think there's some that we know there and more to discover and explore.
Yep. Thank you, Monica. Anybody
I think
else
Ariel was first.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. And I am not the end user because I work at the Department of Natural Resources, but for those of you, Lisa, I'm sure you work with Brienne, who's not on this call, but she is part of our Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, which is part of the Governor's Children's Cabinet. And we've been working on a 3-year action plan that literally this is like the perfect thing to help us with implementing the action plan, where we have 2 priority areas around using nature for mental health in schools. And we're working with Brienne to send out a survey very soon to student support personnel at the public schools related to like, what are they doing with nature? What do they want to do with nature? Kind of what resources? So like, this is just, I kind of knew that this existed, but hearing it here is just absolutely super exciting. And there's another related action around how can you expand nearby nature space at schools and childcare facilities. So I'm just really excited for all this information and the work that's already been done, that we don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, another one of the strategies that we have is early childhood focus. So we look at green schoolyards in the public school system, and we also look at how can we bring this to early childhood, which is such a key component and critical period of brain development when we're thinking about children and families and how we're supporting them, and hopefully also get to them in a way that we can prevent any of these ACEs and the need for foster care. All right, Anna, see your hand raised as well. I know we're running low on time. So.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I am most intrigued by a learning community. It's like my favorite thing. I am curious about anyone's thoughts about, like I can imagine across agency, like different sectors participating in a learning community about implementing the framework. I have 2 questions. Does that make sense? Or would it be more effective if you had, similar like school people, or you mentioned juvenile justice, which I think is a super cool idea. Or if it's like a cross sector. I'm sort of intrigued by the cross sector idea. The other related question is, would you have to have a few people? Like, could you just have individual champions? I think I'm answering my question as I'm asking it. Or key, like full investment by an organization in those sectors participating. You know what I mean? Like you could put a call out, hey, anyone interested in this idea? Or yeah, I don't know. So that's most intriguing to me. And I think, yeah, it fits in with so many of the things, Ariel, that have been discussed in that work group about mental health and well-being. So
and we can answer that, but I just want, because I'm noticing the time and before anybody hops off, I'm sharing the screen. There's another QR code. Hopefully this one is working this time, but there's a post survey that asks you a little bit about how you're thinking about Nature is Healer now. There's space for you to share, as I mentioned previously, your name, your email address, if you do want to connect with us, and we can talk about what other partnerships possibilities there are. You can also just reach out to me. That is my email address there, and then the QR code to our toolkit once again. And we'll send out follow-up information, and I'll share it with you, and then you can send this out to everybody so they can have the links to visit this. And I think the work is most powerful when we can get a lot of full agency buy-in rather than one or two people here. That being said, I think we can talk about what the different options of what that can look like are, and how we might be able to, start with one person at this different agency, and then how do we grow that and expand that. I think the possibility for cross-sector community of practice is a really great idea too, and we can share how is it showing up and how is it growing in each of these different areas. And I think there's some opportunity there to learn from each other. And I think I may have frozen here. Hopefully you all can still hear me. All right. The survey took you to the general website. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with that today. Well, we'll send a follow-up email. Thank you, Priya, letting me know you can see and hear me. We'll send the follow-up email with that post survey. Sorry, my internet is just a mess today. I'm so glad that I was able to at least get through the whole meeting on my hotspot. And just really excited about the opportunity to partner with all of you, and we can continue the conversation and see what possibilities there are, and see what we can do next. And Anna, I'm sure you and I will be in touch.
Great. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone that participated. Yeah, I'm curious where this will go. Yeah. I love planting seeds. All the nature analogies really flourish.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. And just want to say thank you to our KC panel as well. Really great to hear all of those stories. I always love to hear them and how this is looking at their organization. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, adios.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Jen, where will we find the recording?
I can send the recording. I'm going to stop the recording now. Hold on. I think it'll send it to me.